What's something that happened to you in your childhood that you're still mad about? When I was a kid, we had a really big front yard, not too close to the town. And one Christmas, I got a super big, super bouncy ball made of thick rubber. It was awesome because you could roll it, you could throw it, and you could even jump on it. I was so excited. My dad, my older brother, and I took the ball outside right away to play with it. We had a blast for about 3 minutes, which felt like the best time ever. But then my brother had the ball up high and it landed right on top of our well pump. The well pump was the only thing sticking out of the ground in our yard, and it was bad luck because the ball popped. It was really, really sad. A few weeks later, my dad did something amazing. He surprised me with another bouncy ball, just like the first one. I was so happy, again, but when we brought the new ball out of the garage, I started yelling at my brother because I was sure he was going to mess up again. He didn't listen and tried to put the ball really high and far, but he totally missed, and the ball went straight onto the well pump again. It popped just like the first one. I was so upset, and after that, I didn't get another bouncy ball. It was a bummer, but it's a story I'll never forget. And there's the primal anger that I feel when I hear stories of older siblings ruining your things. Story 2. When I was really little, maybe in kindergarten, I went to a church bazaar fundraiser. It was in the late 1970s, and they had one of those old-fashioned vertical roulette wheels. It was set up behind a folding table and had numbers on it. People could bet on the numbers, and if they won, they got prizes. But these weren't fancy prizes. They were just things people donated after cleaning out their closets. I decided to place my bet on the number 6, and just as I did, my brother came by and told me to change my bet to 7. He said 7 was a lucky number, so I quickly changed my bet to 7, thinking I'd get a better prize. Then, an old lady spun the roulette wheel. We all watched as it spun around, and finally it stopped, and of course, guess what number it landed on? Yep, it was number 6, the number I had originally picked. I was so upset that I started crying really, really hard. I couldn't stop. My mom tried to calm me down, but after about 30 minutes, she must have thought, forget this, and decided it was time to take us home. As we were leaving and walking past the roulette table, the old lady who was running the game felt really bad for my mom because I was still crying so much. So she gave me a set of water glasses as a consolation prize. They weren't very nice glasses, but she was trying to make me feel better. To this day, I've learned my lesson. Once I place a bet, I don't change it. I stick with my first choice, no matter what. That experience at the church bazaar taught me a valuable lesson about making decisions and sticking with them. Story 3. When I was in the 8th grade, I took a woodworking class at my middle school. There were only 3 grades in the whole school, 7th, 8th, and 9th. One day, I went to the workshop during lunch to work on my project. I wanted to make sure I didn't fall behind and risk getting a bad grade. There were 2 other kids there, but they weren't from my class. The teacher was helping them with their projects. Halfway through the lunch break, the teacher came over to me and asked if I wanted to leave the workshop. He said they were going to play a song that 8th graders shouldn't hear. I was really awkward back then, and because he asked it like a question, I just said, "Oh, it's okay, I don't mind," and kept working on my project. I was behind and didn't want to leave early because I really didn't want to get a bad grade. But the teacher insisted. He told me again that the song really wasn't for 8th graders. In the end, I left because I was scared of being rude, but looking back on it now, I think, what was that about? It seems like a really weird reason to make me leave. I mean, there's really no song that's okay for a 9th grader, but not okay for an 8th grader. It's so strange that I've been wondering if something weird or inappropriate was going on with the other kids, but honestly, I have no idea. It was just a really odd situation. Story 4. When I was in elementary school, my mom used to drop me off super early in the morning, way before school even started. I would get there so early that sometimes I would sit on the steps outside with other kids who were also dropped off early, waiting for the janitor to open the doors. There were usually about 5 or 6 of us who would wait in the lunchroom for school to start. To pass the time, I came with the idea of bringing my Uno cards. After boring mornings of waiting turned into something fun, and it even felt like we had our own little club. We would play Uno and enjoy ourselves until the school day began. However, there was always this one lunch lady who seemed to have it in for us. No matter how hard we tried to keep the area neat and tidy, she would always complain about how we never pushed in our chairs and left a mess. It was never good enough for her, and she eventually took it to the principal. One morning, we were playing Uno and having a good time when the principal walked over to us. She was stern and quiet as she started gathering up the cards. We all went silent as she took everything away. I tried to help her pick up the cards, hoping she would let me keep them with just a warning. But instead, when she was done, she held out her hand and said, "Give them to me." Feeling defeated, I handed over the cards. She turned around and walked away without saying anything else. The lunch lady stood there with a smug grin, looking at all of us like it served us right. We were just a bunch of kids trying to make the best of the time we had instead of causing trouble, but I guess that didn't matter to them. Also, no, I never did get those cards back, but I guess that's okay because I recently bought a really cool Super Mario Uno set. And for those of you who think it could have been seen as wagering, there was no exchange of money going on. I like to think that playing Uno in the mornings helped us learn good sportsmanship. Story 5. When I was in elementary, we had a big project in school that ended with us writing a story. I spent a ton of time on this project. I worked on it for hours and hours. I was sure it was going to be the best book ever. I thought it would get noticed by a publisher and become the talk of the Scholastic Book Fair. There was no doubt in my mind. The story had to be handed in before school finished for Christmas so my teacher could mark it over the break. I stayed up late until about 10 o'clock at night for about a week before the deadline. That was the closest thing to an all-nighter young kid. It was my masterpiece, my magnum opus. When I got back to school in January, I found out that my teacher, Mrs. Harding, had lost my story. Not only that, but she accused me of not handing it in at all. Because mine was the only one she couldn't find, she decided to call me out in front of the whole class about it. I was so upset that I locked myself in the toilet and cried a lot. To make things worse, it later turned out she found my story after all, but she marked it as if I handed it in late and she only gave me a mediocre grade. Man, I was really hurt and disappointed. I felt like all my hard work wasn't appreciated. Mrs. Harding didn't seem to understand how much effort I had put into my story. It was a tough lesson to learn at such a young age. So, yeah, I wasn't happy with Mrs. Harding. It was a frustrating experience that I still remember clearly. Story 6. When I was in primary school, I was pestered really badly. The girls in my class would spread horrible, nasty rumors about me and call me all sorts of mean names. The boys were just as bad. They would harm me, knock over my books, say awful things to me. One day, the worst girl, we'll call her Rebecca, hurt me in the stomach. I started crying because it was so painful. My teacher noticed that I was crying and asked me what happened. I told her the truth that Rebecca had hurt me. Instead of handling the situation quietly, my teacher decided to involve the entire class. She went to each student and asked them what had happened between me and Rebecca. Most of the kids didn't really know what had gone on, but some of them did. However, nobody was going to tell on Rebecca in front of the whole class, so everyone said that I was lying and that Rebecca hadn't hurt me. Because nobody backed up my story, I got punished for lying. It was like I was the one in trouble even though I was the one who got hurt. And to make things worse, Rebecca's parents called my parents to tell them that I had made false accusations against their daughter. They acted like Rebecca was this perfect little angel who would never do anything wrong. Thankfully, my parents believed me and knew that I was telling the truth, but I'm still really, really angry that my teacher handled the situation the way she did. It wasn't fair to me at all. I was the one who got hurt and I ended up being the one who got in trouble. It was a terrible experience that I'll never forget. Story 7. When I was young, I was completely obsessed with paintball. Yeah, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I saved up money by mowing lawns and helping neighbors with yard work for almost a whole year. I did all this so I could buy my own paintball and equipment. My parents were divorced and I usually stayed with my mom, but sometimes I would stay with my dad and stepmom. One summer, my mom decided to go on a big adventure vacation. She went hiking, skiing, and stayed with her sister out west for most of the summer. So when I arrived at my dad's house, my stepmom was at the door. I was carrying all my stuff, including my brand new paintball gear that I had bought for myself. But as soon as she saw it, she said, "I don't want that in this house. It's not good and I don't like it. I don't want it here." Unfortunately, my dad wasn't there at the moment. If he had been, I think he would have said something to her. So, feeling really down, I went back to my mom's car, put all the paintball gear inside, and watched her drive away. The only thing I wanted to do that summer was play paintball with my friends. I'd worked so hard all year to buy my own gear, and now I was just gonna sit unused in my room while my friends were out having fun. What made it even worse was that I wasn't allowed to play paintball, not at all. At first I thought, fine, I'll just use the rental gear, but nope, my stepmom refused to let me play and somehow convinced my dad to agree with her. Up until that point, I never really liked my stepmom, but we got along okay and I played nice. But after that, it was like war. She went from being neutral to being hostile. The tension between us that summer was really bad. We get along better now that I'm an adult and she's calmed down about her total stance on things, but that whole ordeal still leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I feel like I earned that fun summer and it was taken away from me. Now he needs to go to her house at night and use his paintballs on, yep, her house, but then that's also his dad's house. But then he's also an adult, so story 8. When I was in elementary school, my father told me that my chronic back issues, which were caused by a mild injury and then made worse by poor posture, could be fixed if I slept on a cot. He didn't suggest any physical therapy or anything else. He just said that sleeping on a cot would solve the problem. Years later, when I was a teenager, I woke up one morning with pains running through my hips and spine. The pain was so bad that I could barely move without sobbing. I decided that I needed to stay home from school and rest. My dad didn't react well. He went into my room and flipped the cot over on top of me. I was sobbing from the pain with my bed on top of me for about 20 minutes. I was trying to breathe through the pain before my dad finally said, "Whatever, I guess you can stay home." Even though I'm 20 years old now, 7 years later, I still have chronic back issues. If my father ever mentions that he paid for my doctor's visits for X years, I will ask him why my back was neglected. I don't bring up that incident because I know he will deny it. I don't think I'll ever get over what happened. That is not how you treat a child. Story 9. When I was a kid, I really wanted to play the cello. It was the most beautiful instrument I knew of, and I would pretend all the time that I was a cellist. I would even go to my neighbor's house and ask to play her violin, telling myself I was just getting the hang of stringed instruments. My parents never said no, but they tried to convince me that I didn't actually want to play the cello. They told me it wasn't graceful to sit down and play something so big. They said I'd look ridiculous and that it would be too heavy for me to carry. They also said I'd be embarrassed because I'd be the only person I knew who played it and I'd have trouble making friends if I was practicing all the time. This didn't make sense to me because I already took piano lessons. Despite what they said, I still wanted to play the cello. I'd constantly daydream about it. One day, my really wealthy aunt and uncle came to visit. They were always getting us incredibly generous gifts. I overheard my mother telling them in hushed tones about my obsession with the cello, and I was absolutely beside myself thinking they might consider getting me one for Christmas. Later, we were sitting down and talking, and my uncle brought up Yo-Yo Ma. I beamed and started rambling about how I loved listening to his CDs. But he immediately stopped me to point out that Yo-Yo Ma was a man, and did I know why that was? Because stringed instruments are hard to play, especially for women. In fact, stringed instruments hurt your fingers. They make them have calluses that are hideous and unbecoming of a woman. They make women ugly. Did I know that? Have I ever heard how hideously ugly playing the cello makes women? He was so smug seeing my revulsion, and I could see my parents sharing a congratulatory look. The adults all moved on to talking about something else, but I ran away and cried. I wasn't upset because the thought of being ugly put me off. I was just disgusted because they all clearly knew from the beginning that they wouldn't let me play the cello, and resorted to roping in other people to lie to me to make me want to change my mind. It infuriated me that they wanted to convince me that I was the one who didn't want it and thought they had succeeded. I never brought it up again. Story 10. In 5th grade, I was in advanced English class. I was the only new student in advanced English that year because all the other kids had been taking it since 1st grade or something. They also took advanced math, so they were really smart. One day, our teacher gave us a writing prompt where we had to write our own fictional story about anything we wanted. All the other kids started writing realistic fiction stories about people with problems or diseases. But me, being a normal kid who liked fantasy and video games, decided to write a fantasy sci-fi adventure story called Moon Metal. I was really interested in space, so I knew a lot about all the things space, even for a 5th grader. My story was about 2 American astronauts who met up with other astronauts on an international moon base to fight aliens. The aliens were trying to make a black hole weapon to destroy the Earth. I ended the story with a cliffhanger where the weapon was used, planning to rewrite the second part for our next fictional assignment. I thought my story was pretty good, and everyone in my family and friends who read it thought it was amazing for a 5th grader. But my teacher didn't agree. I got a 0 out of 100 and a sad face on my story because I wasn't allowed to use cliffhangers, and because she said, quote, it wasn't a good enough story. I didn't understand why I couldn't use a cliffhanger if professional writers do it all the time. It got to the point where I cried because my teacher wouldn't even let me read it to the class, which everyone else got to do. My mom got involved after that. I don't take advanced English anymore. Story 11. The incident happened when I was in third grade. It was a few minutes before school started, and we were all just hanging out and talking, doing normal kid stuff. I walked down the hall a little bit and saw an adult woman drag someone I knew out of a classroom. It seemed like nobody else saw this happen, so I was the only one who could tell a teacher about it. I told my story a few times to some administrators, and then I thought it was all over and done with. But about an hour later, the woman came storming into my classroom. She interrupted my class and started yelling at me about how the kid was not her child, so how dare I accuse her. I was completely shocked as she ranted at me for about 5 minutes. I didn't know what to do. This was a fully grown woman berating a child, and the teacher just stood there silently. After she left, I started crying and pretended to be sick so my dad would come and pick me up from school. I was such a goody-goody kid, and I was really traumatized after that event. I had flashbacks for years afterwards. I never told my parents because I thought somehow it was my fault that she was yelling at me. I wish I had told them now because I know they would have been really upset and would have raised hell with the school. To this day, I'm still really angry at the teacher and the school administrators for letting this horrible woman terrorize not only me, but also the boys who were apparently not her children. I'm furious that the teacher who witnessed this didn't step in to stop this woman from yelling at a defenseless child. So, Miss Stephanie, I hope you had an awful life. Story 12. When I was a kid, my parents made a point not to teach me the word candy. They did this so I wouldn't be able to ask for candy. Over time, though, they started doing this with almost any food I try to ask about. Whenever my parents would cook, I'd often ask, "What are we eating tonight?" The most common response was, "It's food. Quit being picky and eat or go hungry." That wasn't very helpful, and it was actually pretty scary to me. I was just trying to learn. All I wanted to know was the name of the food on the plate. I wasn't being picky at all. Because of this, I probably only know about 20% of the food vocabulary that an average person my age would know. I also have no clue how to cook or where to start. It gets really awkward when I talk with others about food. When people ask me if I've ever eaten a specific food before, often I just don't know. There are lots of things I've eaten in my life without knowing what they were called. If someone asks me what I want to eat, it better be a multiple choice question or I just give a blank stare. I wish I knew a good way to sort all this out and learn more about food at the level I should know at my age, but it's just overwhelming for me to think about. It's not just the food either. Everything related to food is a mixed mess in my head. Food, condiments, spices, ways of cooking, cookware, it's all confusing to me. Story 13. I don't know if I'm as mad as I am confused. I remember when I was very little, my cousins were over at my house. I was really proud of my piggy bank and the change I had collected, so I emptied it to show my girl cousin. I forget everything else that happened that day, except when my cousins left, my stepmom told me she had seen my boy cousins walk out with their pockets full of coins. She didn't stop them because she thought I shouldn't have been showing them my money. I remember feeling really confused and hurt that she would just let this happen. I have no idea what lesson she was trying to teach me other than she's a bit harsh. I even remember going over to my cousin's house and thinking about stealing some of his coins since he took mine. But I didn't do it, and now that I'm older, I wonder if my stepmom was lying to me for some reason. I definitely didn't have enough coins to fill pockets, or if she really just let people steal from me. I still think about it sometimes. It's one of those things that just sticks with you. And if any of these stories are sticking with you, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 14. A kid in my class offered to trade me a hollow Charizard for my hollow Genjar. Genjar was my favorite, but Charizard was more valuable, so I agreed to the trade. We made the exchange the next day as school was getting out. I gave him my card with one hand as he gave me his with the other. As soon as the cards left our hands, he took off running. I was confused for a moment, and then I realized that the Charizard I got was in Japanese and was in terrible condition. It looked like it had been through the wash a few times and had seen better days. It was completely worthless. I couldn't chase after him, and I couldn't ask the teachers for help because Pokemon cards were banned on school grounds. There were plenty of other mean and hurtful things that happened to me when I was a kid, but that incident really stood out. It taught me that some people are just untrustworthy, can be real scum. So not cool, Greg. Story 15. In 4th grade, I had Pokemon Special Yellow for my Game Boy Color. I loved it so much. My aunt had gotten it for me for my birthday, and it's probably the only gift I've ever gotten that wasn't something cheap and broken or something that wasn't actually meant for me. I also had Tetris, but I was more into Pokemon. A friend of mine had Pokemon Red and had some kind of legendary Pokemon. I can't remember which one, but it was popular at the time I get it. I confirmed he had it by playing it on the bus one morning. He did indeed have this Pokemon, and little me really wanted it. Since gaming systems, not just Pokemon, but gaming systems in general, were banned at school, we planned to make the switch during a movie. I was supposed to put my game into my locker on the shelf when I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, he'd go out and switch it with his own, thus completing the trade. However, it didn't happen this way. He took both games, and I couldn't really tell anyone about it, not even my parents, since I wasn't supposed to bring it to school. I remember crying so hard when I got home, having lost my favorite game. I still hate him for it 10 plus years later, but he did apologize, so I asked him if he still had it. He said his dog ate it when he was done with it. James, I hope you're hearing this. Story 16. I've always been painfully shy. From first grade to fifth grade, I had my neighborhood friends in my classes. I thought my fifth grade teacher liked me. He would have me stay after school to grade papers for him and buy me a soda. But the next year, he decided to become a sixth grade teacher and kept the entire class except for me. At my elementary school in sixth grade, they divided the sixth graders into two groups. 3 classes rotated in each group. Not only was I now not in a class with a single person I knew, but I wasn't even in that group. I spent the year sitting on a bench alone during lunch. Even in my neighborhood, I suddenly wasn't doing things with the kids I had always known. I don't know why. The next year in junior high, I only saw my old friends at the bus stop. I felt like I was an outsider in my own neighborhood too. Story 17. The 90s, when I was a kid, I had a tire swing in my front yard and it was awesome. The tree had to be put down for some reason and the tire swing went with it. I also had a sandbox in the backyard and my grandma, who helped raise me, asked if she could turn it into a flower garden. I said yeah, but only if she put up a new tire swing. She promised she would. I never got a tire swing, but the sandbox was gone the next day. She also bought me a puppy at the mall one time. I was so happy. I named him Sam and he was a lot of fun. And one day I came home from school and went to let Sam out, but he was gone. My grandma said she gave him to one of our coworkers because her dog passed away. I was devastated. Still am. Lol. Story 18. When I was in 4th grade, our class had to write our own little legends. We had to explain how things came to be, that sort of stuff. Mine was about why wolves travel in packs. I was so into it. I poured my heart and soul into the story, and I even illustrated it. I was artsy when I was younger. I was so excited to have my teacher read it. She was reading my best friend's story before mine, and boy, did she like it. She was making all these comments like, wow, or good touch, and when she finished, she literally yelled, yes, oh my God, Amber, amazing writing. Then it was my turn. She starts reading mine, and she was so critical, unreasonably critical. It's one thing to critique and make a few suggestions, but she ripped my story apart. She let me know how much she hated it. I walked away so crushed I didn't even want to get a grade on it, and I distinctly remember putting forth less effort on all our projects for the rest of the year. Miss Patty, no wonder all the students tormented you. Story 19. I had a group of friends who were kind of the cool kids of my year. We hung out and had a good time during class and recess. At night, we'd chat on MSN and make plans to go see a movie. Suddenly, all of them said they were busy and canceled. I ended up going with my mom since I wanted to see the movie anyway. Who do I run into? That same group of friends, literally trying to hide behind a tree in the theater lobby. The following day, they texted me and asked me to stop following them around school because they thought I was lame. Ever since then, I've had serious anxiety over making friends and finding a community to belong to. I never let them know how much it hurt me, but I still haven't forgiven them. Joke's on them, though. I moved continents and I'm probably facing a more promising future than any of them. I know it's really petty of me to think that, but after being their joke during all of high school, at least I've got something going on for myself. Story 20. Ugh, I have a movie story too. I went to see one of the Harry Potter films with my dad and saw a friend who'd moved to a different school waiting outside the cinema. I said hello and found out she was meeting another of our friends. We went in to get our tickets and didn't think much of it. Then when we got into the screen a bit later, we found our seats were directly behind a bunch of my friends from school, who were all pointedly not looking at me. I thought it was a bit of a weird coincidence, but again, I didn't think too much of it because I was just too excited to see the film. Years later, like literally, I realized that it was a birthday party that I hadn't been invited to. They'd all avoided talking about it around me, so I wouldn't even know I was missing it, and we ended up sitting right behind them. I didn't figure it out for so long because these girls were my friends and we did loads of stuff together. It wasn't until the end of sixth form that two of them planned a secret girls' holiday without me and another friend, instead choosing to go with someone they didn't hang out with nearly as often and someone from another school that I realized. In 7 years of knowing this girl, I'd been to one birthday party of hers, but there were at least another two that I knew of that all of our friends had been invited to, except me. 3 if you counted the cinema. Now, the thing is, her birthday was just into the summer holidays, so before Facebook took over, it was pretty easy to hide a party, and I wouldn't mind betting she had one every year. 4 years on, and I only talk to one of them now, the other who was left out of the holiday. And like others, I have serious issues making friends. Over 4 years of uni, I only connected fully with maybe 2 people and spent the entire time worrying that I was imposing on the group of friends I was hanging out with and wondering if any of them would notice or care if I stopped sitting in our spot in lectures. Bonus story on the party girl, one year she told me flat out that she wasn't having a party. I bought her a present and arranged to come over on her birthday to give it to her. When I got there, she was in the back garden and her mom told me to wait in the lounge. After a few minutes, I went into the kitchen to see what was taking so long and was ushered back into the lounge before I could get past the door. She eventually came in, opened her present, said thanks, and sort of wandered towards the door in a subtle, "Thanks, now get out." I mentioned that I'd seen a friend of ours on FB ask another friend to bring Twister to hers tonight and that I thought there wasn't a party. She then lied to my face again and said it wasn't a party, her grandparents were coming over. The next day, what's plastered all over Facebook? Hundreds of pictures from the barbecue she'd had with all of our friends, including several I'd hardly seen her talk to. Her mom was keeping me out of the kitchen so I couldn't see the party prep going on. No idea why, but she convinced her mom to lie to me to keep me from coming to her party. Back at school after the summer, and she's still acting like we're best of friends. To this day, I have no clue what she thought she was doing, but it completely messed up my ability to tell who's actually my friend. Story 21. My group of friends included this guy who went to another school, but I knew him well. So we're nearing the end of high school when a bunch of us were supposed to hang out at this guy's place. Let's call him X. Suddenly, the day of, everything and everyone goes all vague, like maybe we're canceling. X is a little sick, but we'll see. I live just down the road, so I passed by their house that night after renting a movie and saw all of my friends in their living room. They had big windows. Everyone was doing something right close to them. It was night and they had the light on, so it was easy to see all the way from the street. I called one guy, all vague, and was about to confront him when he said, "Look, I'm gonna level with you. We're all at X's house. He said he doesn't want you here and no one knows why. I think this is bad, so I'm ditching this place if you want to hang." That guy is still my best friend. I called another guy who was supposedly my friend. I watched through their window from the street only to see him and his girlfriend tell everyone to be quiet, obviously saying that I'm calling. He proceeds to tell me it never went down, so he's just hanging with his girlfriend. I tell him I'm outside and I can see them from the street, and get this, he and his girlfriend actually duck to hide. I ask him, "How dumb can you possibly be? I already saw you two, you absolute morons." That guy and I barely speak. We meet each other maybe once every few years at some function or other and have nothing to discuss. X then calls me, says it's not him, it's his older brother that said X can only bring in a certain number of friends. So he had to ditch someone, but it isn't personal. I told him to go stuff himself and haven't spoken to him since. I ended up hanging out with my best buddy and 2 other guys that decided watching a movie with me was better than hanging out with a lying sack. Those guys are still my friends. X disappeared, as did the ducking guy. It split our group, and I'm glad it did. Story 22. In first grade, I had a friend called Joshua. Now, I liked Joshua. He was a good kid. We talked about Kingdom Hearts. It was a good time. So we're at recess, and we're all playing tag, and out of nowhere, mid-game, Joshua runs towards the teacher, crying. The teacher then furiously calls me over and says, "Why did you give Joshua the middle?" At this point, I'm so confused because I never did such a thing. Meanwhile, Joshua is behind her crying, saying, He did it. Yes, he did. I'm just denying it and thinking to myself, Joshua, what is your deal, bro? I thought we were a Kingdom Hearts bros. This massive back and forth between me, the teacher, and Joshua continued for a good 3 minutes before I just thought to myself, dude, I'm so over this. This is absurd. And decided to unjustly turn myself in, saying, fine, whatever, I did it. She gave me detention, sat out of recess for a week, and gave Joshua the fabled gold star for snitching. Story 23. So, my twin brother was a Cub Scout. I, being a girl, was not a Cub Scout, despite my interest in all the Cub Scouty things. My dad had a large collection of power tools and woodworking skills. When I was young, the Cub Scouts did their annual Pinewood Derby, aka all the boys came to my house and my dad helped them make little cars. They'd done this for 3 years, and every year I made a car too, even if I wasn't allowed to enter it. Well, that year there were fewer scouts, and the scoutmaster decided to invite me and 2 other girls who were related to scouts to make cars and enter the race. I was thrilled because my twin and I are competitive. I painted my car bright purple, put a design on it, and named it the Crag Mangler. Day of the race, my car is fast, perfectly legal by the standards of the race, and I made it with minimal help from Dad. The boys mostly just had Dad make them and then painted them, so I was proud. It actually won several of the races. They did okay, 12 races of 6 cars each, and came in first or second every time it raced. I was super proud. End of the night, they announced the winners. I forget who won 3rd place. I won 3rd. A scout named Mikey got 1st. He got a giant candy bar and a fancy plaque. The 3rd place guy and I each got a nice cardstock certificate and a small, cheap candy bar. I was still very happy. I'd earned that 2nd place. I was as good as the boys. Take that. Until Scoutmaster took me aside. Hey, Hedgie, your car was very good. You must be very proud of it. Yep. I wanted to let you know that your car was actually the fastest one here. You should be very proud. Mikey's car was faster. Well, your car actually won, but this is a scouting event, so we had to give 1st place to a scout. Anyway, you did a good job. Congratulations. Thank your dad for all his help for me. I think Scoutmaster expected me to react like his niece would have, good little Mormon girl, conveniently forgetting that the 2 of us and the other girl were known for driving away Sunday school teachers by asking uncomfortable questions, and how religion treats women. I think he expected me to see that he was complimenting my hard work and that I would be a mature, sensible young lady and eat my fun-sized Snickers. This is why he's Scoutmaster McDumb. I pitched an absolute fit. I told everyone exactly what he'd said, that I'd won fair and square, but because I was a girl, I wasn't allowed to win. I didn't let it settle down. The next year, there was no Pinewood Derby. The year after that, they did it. A girl entered and she won 1st place. I'm so proud of her, but I am still bitter. Where's my giant candy bar, Scoutmaster McDumb? This is the first time I'm willing to join up in whatever mob assembled to get this woman to get her giant candy bar. Story 24. In 4th grade, there were 2 bathroom break times where a group of people would go use the bathroom at a time. The way the bathroom was set up, there was a kind of short hallway where at the end was a mirror. If you were standing outside of the bathroom, you could see that mirror, which would then give you a reflection of the stalls. The teacher would always wait around the entrance to supervise and make sure everyone was actually in the bathroom and that everyone left the bathroom. So one time I was there with a group of girls. Sometimes the teacher would scold us for being loud, messing with the soap and making bubbles, etc. And one time, right before he started scolding, I just entered a stall. However, I saw a little splotch of liquid on the toilet seat, so I didn't want to use it. I turned around to go look for another stall, and this all happened while he maybe said a sentence like, "Girls, don't be so loud," or something. All of a sudden he goes, "Carbs and puppies, you can just come out here now since you were trying to pretend you weren't there." Like as if I was hiding so I wouldn't be included in the group of girls he was scolding. So I'm like, "What?" And I exit the bathroom and tell him I don't know what he means. He asks why I entered and left the stall. For some reason, 4th grade me felt embarrassed about telling my male teacher that there was whiz on the seat. I struggled, saying, sometimes there's things on the seat. And he's like, "What things?" And I don't even know if he was just trying to keep embarrassing me or genuinely didn't know what I was talking about. I just gave up and went back to the classroom. A few minutes later, while I'm sitting at my desk, he tells me he had a female teacher check the stall and she said there wasn't anything on the seat. The whole situation made me so mad, like he was just an almighty knower of everything and knew exactly why I entered and then exited a stall, even though I was clearly looking for another stall. So why would I enter, then exit, then go back into another stall if I really wanted to use a bathroom? Story 25. In third grade, I was in music class, and our teacher's name was Mrs. Butler. She had gotten upset at another student in my class for speaking while she was talking and had given him 30 minutes of detention after school. He was not the one who did it and had been silent the entire time, and he was visually upset at this, and you could see tears starting to form. I raised my hand and told her that he was not the person speaking and that he didn't do anything wrong. She got angry at me for saying she was wrong and for standing up for him, so I also got 30 minutes of detention after school. This was the first time I stood up for someone in my life, and I got in trouble for it. I spent hours crying to my mom, explaining that I was just trying to do the right thing. So, if you read this, Mrs. Butler, you know who you are, and you can go stuff yourself. Story 26. When I was in kindergarten, my stepbrothers came to visit, so it was me, my sister, my half-brother, and my two stepbrothers. Now, one of the stepbrothers was a notorious troublemaker, would break stuff and then blame someone else. My stepdad had this bunny figurine that he got from his mom or something like that, but it had two blue eyes that had glitter on them, so they sparkled. Anyway, my parents were gone for a while at the store, and when they came back, they noticed that one of the eyes on the bunny had fallen off. Chances are it fell off on its own, but since they were gone when it happened, they thought someone either broke it. They made us all stand in separate corners in the living room and waited until one of us admitted to breaking the bunny. It had gotten to the point where it had been about an hour and a half in the corner, and we weren't allowed to talk or even sit. My parents went into the kitchen to start making the pizzas we got for dinner, and my siblings kept trying to convince me to take the fall. I was the youngest. It got to the point where I was so tired of standing that I just took the fall. I didn't get pizza or ice cream that night and got grounded for a week. I'm pretty sure it was my stepbrother who broke it, but his life is a complete mess, so I guess it all worked out. Story 27. I wouldn't say that I'm still mad about it, because at the end I got the last laugh anyways, but here it goes. In sixth grade, we were doing a group project where we were using straws and tape to engineer a structure that was of a certain height and could survive an earthquake. The teacher shaking the desk back and forth really hard. I came up with an idea to put a wide base of straws on the bottom of the tower to prevent it from tipping over when it wobbled. My group mates, who were mean at the time, they've gotten better now, 7 years on, refuted my idea, saying that they were just 4 straws and too weak to make a difference. Long story short, the situation kind of devolved into an argument until the teacher pulled us aside. We talked over our differences and the teacher stuck up for my idea, so we wound up building the wide base of straws at the bottom of the tower. We were one of the last groups to have their structure tested, and of course, despite rocking the table furiously back and forth, our structure did not tip over. I was delighted. It was the best told you so feeling in the world. After we won the competition, one of my group mates that had refuted my ideas the hardest came up to me and mentioned that he was wrong and that it seemed like my idea actually helped. It feels so good to be right. And if you felt pretty good about any one of these stories, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.